So we lose our whole audience? Yeah. Oh, 13. There we go. 14. Hmm. Are we ready? All right, let's do this. Okay, let's do this.
Guys, welcome back to Coliseum Forum. If you've joined us in our previous weeks, you know at this point we've talked to writers and publishers and artists. At this point, I'm really excited for our guest today. We have my boss, Mr. Coliseum himself, the founder and president of Coliseum of Comics, Phil Boyle. We're going to talk to him about what it's like to be a retailer today versus yesterday, and kind of his experiences in the comics retail community. But Phil, very excited to have you on today.
Well, glad to be here. You guys talked me into doing this, so here we are. So,
No, and you're absolutely right. We did talk you into doing this. You have been in comics on the retail side for longer than the average customer in our stores has been alive. Not to make you feel old, but there is a
oh, not at all.
there's a well of knowledge there, right? And I think most people that shop at Coliseum are a fan of Coliseum, and so some of the customers that we've picked up in the last few years maybe don't remember you being in the stores, but there was a time, a very long time, that you were behind the register doing everything.
Yeah, pretty much, 5, 6, sometimes 7 days a week for decades, literally decades. But, the company has grown and we've added a lot of phenomenal people who have helped grow it. And now I'm basically a desk job type guy.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And Billy's contributed mildly in the last few years.
right. so so we started Coliseum got started in 1983. How old were you in 1983?
I was a whole 20 years old at the time.
So I asked you this before, and I've asked you this prior to the Coliseum Forum. What made you think you could start and run a business at 20 years old?
I was naive. I had no clue. And because of that, it just sort of happened. A friend who I used to sell comics to before I opened the store, I he called me and he said, "Do you know that you can rent a building for only $300 a month?" And I thought, wow, $300 a month. I can make $300 a month selling comics. I can do that. He didn't mention anything about phone and electric and insurance and all these other little expenses that come along.
Right.
So I actually did rent a place. It was $380 a month. Then I moved after 6 months into a place that was $160 a month plus $8 tax. So my total rent for the month was $168. So, and that began Coliseum.
And so let's rewind a little bit before that. You said you mentioned you had a friend that you had sold comics for. Obviously, you didn't just walk in and open up a comic shop and have no, interest or knowledge in the industry. So where did you start with comics? What was the first comic book that you were like, okay, I like this?
I, those stories that you hear when people come in and say, I joined the military or I went to college or I stepped out for a beer and my mom got rid of my comics.
Right.
Well, my brothers and I were recipients of one of those boxes of comics
Right.
because my mom worked with a woman. She heard that we had been dabbling in comic books and brought us home a big box of comics. And I pretty much binged the box of about 200 plus books, many of which were coverless, beat up,
Right.
all that kind of stuff. And I read one in there, which is Legion of Superheroes 359. It was part one of two. And it was cool. I liked it. And my brother Brendan said, don't bother reading that when it's part one. You'll never get part two. I got part two. and I read it. And that same coverless copy now holds a place. You've seen it in our warehouse conference room. Yep. It's there, coverless, framed. There it is. That's what got me going.
So you guys get these comics kind of donated to you. You kind of voraciously dig through them and kind of find this love for comics. But you didn't start with selling comics at Coliseum, right? You were doing like a convention circuit kind of deal, right?
Yeah, we started ordering through mail order, and then I was one of the original speculators. So when John Byrne was doing X-Men, I was buying 30 copies a month off the newsstands.
Oh, wow.
Things like that. When Frank Miller was doing Daredevil, I was buying copies of that. Every number one, I was buying 20 copies of. So I was one of those guys at the time. So in circa 1980, 1981, if you couldn't find X-Men on the stands, I'm sorry, it happens. And then I'd go to stores and I'd buy some, and I'd go to conventions, which were basically just held in hotel rooms at the time.
Right.
Maybe 200 or 300 people would show up. And then I decided I could probably do this. So I called and I got a table at Orlando Con, and I started selling comics. And then I did a convention in Jacksonville and Gainesville and a few other places, Miami, and it grew. And then I decided, that's when the friend called up and said, yeah, you can rent a place for $300. And so Coliseum of Comics landed itself in a retail location, and it's been going ever since.
So let me ask you this. I mean, you've been a retailer through a lot of the big historical events. I mean, you survived the crash in the 90s, the distributor wars, all the way up until now. We're in 2020. Yes. What if you could give Phil Boyle at 20 in 1983 some advice that Phil Boyle in 2020 has, from all the experience? What would you tell yourself in 1983?
Buy Microsoft. Okay, all right. Barring that, the market is a fickle thing, and what's hot today may not be hot tomorrow. But to me, the one thing that has always been a constant has been nice condition. I'm not saying mint. I'm not saying 9.6. Nice condition, quality back issues. They have consistently, year after year after year, no matter what the flavor of the month is, no matter who the hot artist is this month, good quality back issues have continued to maintain their value. And I'd say, put your stock in that, put your faith in that, because that continues and has continued to maintain throughout the years.
So let me ask you this, and you've watched the industry evolve over time, right? Like from where it was in 1983 to where we are now.
Very much.
What are some of the big challenges you faced in 1983 just getting started?
One of the things that happened then, it's kind of funny. Now you have previews, you have artists and writers pimping their next project on Facebook and Instagram. You have all this vast knowledge coming out, all this stuff. We used to order comics based on Green Lantern, 128, and a cover price. And that was all the information we got. Thor, 337, new artist. And we ordered it. And all of a sudden, everyone's going, this is cool. I remember that was one of the key books that came out in October of 1983. We're still a really new store. It's still a book I look at and think that was one of the first hot books
right
during my earliest days. And if we'd known, hey, introduction of a new character that everybody's going to love,
sure,
that would have been really cool. We could have ordered some extras, but nobody knew because we weren't getting any information really.
So obviously solicitation and things like that, the things we have now, like you mentioned, previews and things right. like that, there were just none of those tools back then.
No, we did have a thing called Comic Reader that Paul Levitz was actually editing in this before he was with DC Comics. Well, he's been with DC Comics since, God knows when, but he was doing this on the side. And we'd find more information out of his publication than we would off of the order form.
Okay.
He'd have all the latest news and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, John Byrne is leaving X-Men. It's like, is he allowed to do that? Can he actually do that? I don't think John Byrne's allowed to leave X-Men,
Right.
because you just can't do that. That's an institution. And he did. And he did some great stuff after that. But the thing is, we found out more through secondary sources than we did from the publishers at the time. The publishers were these fictitious people who lived on Mount Olympus somewhere
Right.
that we had zero contact with.
Which is, I think, today is totally different. I mean, we have one of our fans watching, and they mentioned that Dan Didio. Dan Didio has done lunches with Coliseum fans and stuff in the past. I think we're probably more connected now than we've ever been in history.
We are very connected these days, and I will say that I have been very fortunate that because of my longevity in this industry, and because Coliseum has been a successful comic store, that I do get the ear of some of the publishers that some of my compatriots may not on a regular basis.
Right.
So I try and represent the industry as a whole in a lot of cases.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, I I can text a lot of these people and say, what in the world are you thinking? And things right. along those lines, which during coronavirus, we've had a couple of those conversations.
Sure. So the follow-up to that question is, do you think Dan might come back to writing comics at some point?
I don't think you're ever going to be able to take comics out of Dan's blood. I know that Dan does have a very creative side to him.
Sure.
And with creative people, it is a passion. Writers want to write, artists want to draw. Even if an artist is sitting at a table, next thing you know, they're doodling on the napkins or the tablecloth or whatever it is, which really upsets the people at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, but that's the way it is sometimes.
So this is something when we talk to publishers, we kind of ask them, what do you think of the state of the direct market right now? We kind of know where the publishers stand at the moment. How do you feel about the state of the direct market?
The direct market is in flux. Not the first time. And if it pulls out and goes completely back to normal, it will be in flux again at some point in the future.
Absolutely.
I've always felt my job is tell me what the rules are and I'll learn to play by them and I'll win. So I don't know where this market is going. We used to say when Paul Levitz was in charge of DC that DC being our best trading partner at the time, that could change overnight if Paul got hit by a beer truck. Luckily, Paul did not get hit by a beer truck, but we've certainly seen some changes at DC Comics and what they're doing, and that's going to impact the rest of the market. Positive, negative, history will decide.
Sure, absolutely. Now, this is another question we've sort of asked all the publishers that have come in, and so I'm going to ask you, if somebody wants to work at Coliseum, and there are people that want to work for Coliseum, what are the things if you look at resumes, what are the things that stand out to you? Like, what would you look for in the ideal Coliseum team member?
I think no matter what field you're in, one of the key things that any employer wants is passion. Show me that you want to do this. Show me that you like doing this. If you're showing up for a paycheck, not only will I know, everybody else who works with you, everybody who encounters you, they're going to know it.
Right.
If you don't love what you're doing, please don't come work for us. Go find something you do love doing.
Sure, absolutely.
And that's what I said. Writers have to write. Artists have to draw. It's got to be in your blood that you want to talk to people. You want to be part of a community that enjoys being nerds. I collected comic books when I was in high school. I was on the chess team. Let's just say that my options with the opposite sex were, but let's say they were infinite and go from there. Okay. So,
yeah, sure.
But it's one of those things that I've lived the nerd culture pretty much all of my adult and teenage life and all that kind of stuff. If you aren't comfortable in that, if you don't have a passion for that, find something you are passionate about. You can still come see us, but don't do this for a living if you're not truly passionate about it.
Sure. No, absolutely. And I if you're watching, if you are applying for a job, I'm actually the one that does the hiring. So listen to what he said, because that's very, very important. With that said, though, so before you did comics, you were a short order cook, right? Is that correct?
I started out, I think my first semi-real job was my sister's assistant as a paper boy. Um, and she taught me what it was to work hard for no money. And then I got my own paper route,
Right.
which I I raised my route from 68 people when I got it to about 120 when I left. I pretty much exhausted my area that I could sell into.
Right.
And then I went and worked at Sambo's for 5 years, which, if you're unfamiliar with Sambo's, it was the counterpart to Denny's. It was to Denny's what Wendy's is to McDonald's, or what Burger King is to McDonald's. And then I worked at Denny's for a year after I opened Coliseum. I was going to college, working at Denny's evenings and nights, and uh, doing Coliseum. And I did that for a year just because Coliseum was breaking even, but that left no money for gas or anything fun like that. So I worked the night shift at Denny's for that.
So when Coliseum was first getting off the ground, you had Coliseum. It existed. It was a retail space, but
Yes.
then you'd work the store, and then at night you'd go and make pancakes and eggs.
Yeah, about 30 hours a week at that time. Yeah. And I went to college. So
That's a lot.
I was 20. I had nothing but energy. And, it was one of those things, I'll sleep when I'm dead, that type of, that type of mantra at the time. So
Sure.
I was fine with it. It worked out okay.
So one of the things we've already kind of touched on is you did survive the 90s crash. You saw the distributor wars and these kind of big events that happened in comics retail throughout the late 80s into the 90s. For you, what has been the biggest challenge as a retailer in our 37 plus years?
I think the constant challenge has always been trying to figure out what's the next thing. I've always said in the comic industry, for every 3 people you have 5 jobs that have to be done. And unfortunately, that means that everybody is wearing multiple hats. Everybody is trying to make ends meet in the industry. And most comic retailers do not do this for the yachts and the trips to, Kokomo every other year and that type of thing. They do it to biggie size the Happy Meal, as Bill Gemma said at one point, and upset everybody in the industry. I think everyone was mostly upset because it's almost true in a lot of cases. This is a passion-driven industry.
Right.
And that means that people do it for the love of what they do. There's an awful lot of people that could be making a lot more money in another field, but they chose to do this because it's what they love to do.
Sure. Absolutely. With that said, we do have a question. So somebody asked, where did you go to school?
I went to Oak Ridge High School. And I say that because when they say, what school did you go to, for your security question, I will never say Oak Ridge High School. I just want you to know that. So, and then I went to UCF.
UCF. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of my follow-up question to that, though, would be, you've made a career, you've made a life out of comics. I mean,
yes,
your son is one of our vice presidents. Coliseum was open before he was born, and now he's a grown-up who is actively engaged with the business and everything. If you hadn't gone into comics, if your friend never called you and said, hey, rent's only $300 for this retail space, where do you think Phil Boyle would be now?
that is when I started at UCF, I was going into respiratory therapy. So who knows? Maybe I'd be in a hospital now, taking care of corona patients. But that wasn't something that was really screaming at me. One thing I love more than comics themselves is the business of comics. I truly love this industry. I truly love the business aspect of comics and what comics offer, what the whole business offers.
Right.
That's kind of where my passion is lying. So business inevitably would have been where I was.
Sure.
Could I have been selling something as cool as comics and games? Probably not.
Right.
So this has been a real dream type thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, you know, a lot of it, like you said, it is passion driven. And the things we sell generally bring happiness, right? Like, I don't know if I've ever worked with a customer who was mad at me for selling them comics. You know, we don't sell auto insurance. We don't, you know, we don't sell kitchen equipment. Or used cars even. We sell comic
Right.
books, right? So,
Right.
I think that, like you said, it is something that's,
We sell experiences.
we do. Absolutely.
We sell the experience of gaming with your friends. We sell the experience of going into space, whether it's through Star Wars or through some of the new great comics that are out there, the new Adam Strange or things like that.
Right.
We sell great stories. We sell experiences, and that's why we're such a positive entertainment type thing. It lets people escape and find a new world
Sure.
that's not under quarantine, that's not having problems, that things are better. And
Right.
even if they're not better, they'll get better in the next issue.
So somebody was wondering, are there any actual titles that you're keeping up with currently?
You know, there's some that I do scan still. Um, One of the things that I kind of said along the lines is every week we advise retailers on what we buy. And it started out as this is how Coliseum is ordering, and I started publishing it. But the whole thing is the gallery, which is made up of managers and some other folks within the store, which is a broad range of men and women of different ages, different races, orientations, everything else. So we get quite a diverse voice into what's good and what's not, why I love this. And one of them will say, you know, six of them will say, this is garbage. I don't like this. And then one of them will go, I am so excited about this. I can't wait for it to come out. And I know that that person has found something that spoke to them, and they know the people in their stores that it will likewise speak to. So then we look at it and we say, well, that one person may be onto something. So I take their passion and then I temper it with the numbers.
Right.
I'm very much a got to maintain the budgets, got to maintain, we have to keep the lights on. Nothing ruins a comic book experience like trying to read in the dark.
Sure.
So we try and maintain, you know, I maintain the business end. Even though I have a passion for that, I let the people who are in the stores maintain the passion for the actual projects.
Sure. And so far it works. As a member of the gallery, being
Yeah.
part of that committee and kind of influencing the things that we sell, it's a really great experience. And I think it overall helps us and kind of sets us apart from other retailers in that way.
And just let anybody who's watching know, uh, you're an extension of the gallery if you talk to the people in our stores.
That is absolutely
If
true.
you tell them, I'm excited about this, they're going to remember that, because most people are waiting for something to come out. If you're excited for something that you saw that's coming out, whether it's your favorite writer or artist on Facebook, whether you saw it in a news article, or whether you're reading previews, let them know, because they're going to translate that to me, and I'm going to translate it to our orders along with them.
Right.
So be part of the gallery, be part of it. We can all have better comics.
I've honestly had that happen. And I say I hate it, but I actually love it when a customer sells me a comic, and usually it's just through their passion or enthusiasm for the project. Then it's like, okay, well, I have to see what this is about, right? Like, they're so excited about this. Let me pick this up. And honestly, like you said, it's just an extension of our gallery as the Coliseum, you know, community as a whole, right?
Right. Yeah.
So we also, the follow-up question to that was, they want to know, do you have any favorite artists or writers in the industry?
A lot of my favorite artists go back quite a ways.
Yeah.
I own original pages from Jim Starlin. I loved his stuff.
Yeah.
And the page I own from him is a Legion of Superheroes page, of course.
Of course.
I own some Legion pages by Kurt Swan.
Okay.
Kurt Swan was a Superman artist and a DC artist for decades, who never got his due because he wasn't flashy, but he told wonderful stories. I love Mike Grell's work. I love, there's a lot of these guys who I just love a lot of the older books that they did. And it didn't look so I don't know, conveyor belt like it does today in
Sure.
some of the books.
That
There's still
house
a lot of
style you
great
see a lot.
artists today, though, that are putting their everything into it.
Sure. So our next question from viewers, we unveiled our Gladiator Hulk in Kissimmee today. It was kind of a big deal for us. It was awesome. If you haven't seen it, we have the video up on our Facebook and we'll be up on YouTube a little bit later. Um, what are the chances that our new Tampa store could get a giant Hulk statue?
Well, we are probably going to have our Green Hulk. Like we said, we're going to send him to the nail and hair salon. And once he gets back, I'm going to give it a 50-50 that he may end up in Tampa.
Okay. See, there you go, David. 50-50 chance. Um, so, the way we kind of do things now, we have 8 Coliseums, right? We're one of the largest comics retailers in the world at this point.
Right.
You started in a shop that was $380 a month and then downgraded to a shop that was $160.
Yes, and it was 480 square feet, which 480 square feet. There's a lot of apartments out there that are 1,100 square feet. It
Right.
seems to be average for some of these. So think less than half of that. That was the store.
So
So
how long between a 400 square foot space and then, when you compare it with our Kissimmee location, which is like 4,800 square feet,
it's 6,200.
60, sorry,
Yeah,
Kissimmee, 6,200 square feet.
right.
At what point in the past 37 years have you had a moment where you just sat back and you're like, yeah, I made it. I did it.
I think the minute you sit back and say, yes, we're here, I think you start to fall behind. I I think that business in general, the comic industry in particular, it changes daily. During the last 60 days, it's changed almost hourly.
Absolutely.
Uh, a new announcement comes out, a new edict comes down. There's new strictures, there's relaxed strictures, there's different strictures. We've been rolling with these punches now for 37 years. So I don't think you ever sit back and say, yes, we made it. You may take a deep breath once in a while, but you got to keep moving then because it doesn't stop. It keeps
Sure.
coming.
No, absolutely. Um, we have another question. Any intention to expand further out than our current reach? Because we go from North Florida all the way down to Tampa at this point. Would we ever consider moving into like Tallahassee or Pensacola or even out of Florida?
The the short answer is sure. The longer answer is, do we have the intention? Yes. Do we have a plan currently in place? No. We had some plans, but it's funny. You get a worldwide pandemic, and all of a sudden everything goes on hold. I don't know what the heck that's about, but there you go. We are looking. There's some stores that may be available coming up after this comes out where guys just say, I just don't want to do this anymore.
Right.
So we'll see. Never say never.
So, I asked the question a little bit ago. What advice would you give Phil Boyle in 1983? What
Mhm.
advice, we have our Coliseum forum and we
Hold on. The stream choked.
stream choked. Give us one moment. What do you think happened there?
No idea. Just all of a sudden the audio caught up, and then it's doing this. I think Facebook Live is just overwhelmed
I
today.
do too. Because like I said, when we were trying to use it in the store for the Hulk, it was doing the same thing.
I don't want to stop it and have to restart it, so I'm hoping maybe it'll just come back.
Yep.
And you'll probably hear me talking.
That's fine. I think people understand at this point.
Dear Facebook,
Yes.
because it's not on my end. My end
No.
is clean,
No, I know. I can see it.
and unless the internet died, which would be, well, if the internet died, I wouldn't see this spinning wheel,
Right.
Yeah.
and I wouldn't be talking to Phil.
Yes. But here we are.
No, Facebook. I don't know. This may not be the best option going forward for long term.
You don't think?
Yeah, we've had hiccups with it, but we've gotten through them.
Yeah.
But it just literally just stopped the stream, and I did nothing, didn't touch anything. It's trying to reconnect.
Oh, hey guys. Just because we can't see ourselves on the preview doesn't mean that people can't still see us. It actually looks like we've been live this whole time.
Oh, really?
Yes.
What a piece of crap.
Yeah. So if you've been listening to us while we work to figure it out what's going on, you actually got to hear our vice president of Coliseum, one of our vice presidents at Coliseum, Paul. If you're a longtime Coliseum customer, you may have remembered him from the Proto Millennia store, right? Is that where you started at? You?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, well, it's still...
Yeah. So it's still going. Yeah. So for our end, just in case anybody wonders what happened there, on our end, everything kind of froze up and it looked like everything was sort of queuing. And so for us, we thought there was some latency. So we're like, oh, we'll just give it a few seconds to kind of iron out. And apparently you guys were able to see and hear us complain as we do that. Yeah, no, David, no F-bombs. You're right.
Yeah, let's avoid that.
Okay, so where we left off, say for example me, I decide I want to open my own comic shop, right? What would be the advice you gave me if I come to you and I say, Phil, this is my favorite thing I've ever done, which we both know is true. I want to open my own shop. What is the parting advice you give to me?
Don't do it. It would be very tough to open a comic store in today's market.
Sure.
Realistically, it would be. I would say that you have to be diversified, as in it's tough to just sell comics these days. It's tough to just sell games. It's tough to just sell Funko Pops, things like that. You have to be a more diversified store that's going to have a broader appeal to help pay the rent as you go along. So that'd be the first thing, is you have to diversify what you're going to carry. And you have to think about, a lot of times it's not carrying what you want to carry, it's carrying things that people who come into your store want.
Right.
I don't think any of us on the planet read every comic.
Sure.
We don't play every game, and we don't collect every action figure, statue, or anything else. But what we do is we pick and choose from a lot of different things, as does everyone else.
Right.
So if you're not diversified, you're going to have a really hard time surviving.
Sure. And would you argue that's probably the biggest key to your longevity at this point?
We started out as a comic book and game store, but the evolution of adding things. Now, when we first opened, if you carried comic books, you carried new comic books and you carried back issues.
Right.
There were almost zero trade paperbacks at the time. And when Dark Knight, the first trade paperback from DC, came out, that I recall, Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. Dark Knight had been a great book. We were selling back issues for $10 a pop on the first one. Huge book. And they announced, we're going to reprint this in a collection, and we're going to sell it at a discount over cover price.
Right.
It's going to be $9.99 instead of $2.99 for 4 issues.
Right.
And collectively, we were certain this was going to destroy the back issue market, absolutely eviscerate it. We were a little bit wrong. So what it turned out to be is it made stories accessible to people who previously would not be able to afford to buy Dark Knight, because every issue to buy it now, after that, right now, if you tried to buy that series, it's probably going to put you back $250.
A little bit more if you're doing the whole run. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but now you can still buy the trade paperback. I think it's $19.99 or something like that now.
Exactly. Yep.
So it allows you to experience these stories that were previously reserved only for people who could find them in backstock. So as the trade paperbacks came out, we started carrying those. And then the first statue was offered. And we looked at it and said, who in their right mind is going to pay $89 for, do you know what the first statue for DC was?
No, absolutely not. What was it?
Sandman. Sandman was a very hot property at the time. And so the statue came out as going to be $89. And retailers are looking at, I mean, your average comic book at the time was $1.25 or $1.50, whatever it was at the time. We're looking at it saying, this item is going to cost us $50 to carry.
Right.
That's a lot of money for somebody to drop $89 on this thing. There was no way. So I got in one. And then all of a sudden it's a crazy, everyone's getting $100 for them. Who's spending $100 for a statue? It's a statue. Come on. Well, next thing you know, we've got, if you look in our Kissimmee store or Millennia store, we've got statues that are $2,000, $3,000.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the quality is so off the charts on these things now. They're large, oversized statues that are absolutely spectacular pieces of art. So it started a whole market, and we were in on it. And we carried action figures. And when Pops came out, we carried Pops.
Oh boy, do we.
And we've added things along the line. We'll add more things as they come out and as it becomes viable.
Fair enough. And so, we talked a little bit about the challenges that, you retailers face now that they didn't when you first opened. Let's talk about a kind of a big elephant in the room. Digital comics. That's not a problem you had in 1983, right?
No, we didn't have a problem with digital anything in 1983. Day one when I opened, I had a computer on the front counter. It was a VIC-20 which had 20K,
right?
And it had another 8 plug-in.
Yeah.
So it was 24. I think it was 16 and 8. So it was 24K that we could run our numbers on it.
Okay.
It was really a big glorified calculator.
Right.
But that was the peak of technology at the time. This was amazing stuff. This was really cool. There was no internet.
Right.
So there was, but it was a tiny, minuscule thing between nerds at colleges and things like this at the time, which that wasn't me. But the cool thing about it is as technology came along, it opened a lot of doors for a lot of things, of course. But one of the things that it did is digital comics are a great way for people to experience something. A lot of publishers offer their first issues for free after it's been out for a couple of months. Try this,
right.
Try this. And somebody said the biggest problem as an author is not that somebody's going to steal your work. It's that somebody will never read your work to begin with.
Right.
And that's very true. So a simple deal is digital comics are out there. They are 100% not collectible. They are a different experience.
Sure.
And if that's something you enjoy, okay, I'm not going to say that you're wrong. Comics are comics. But I've always been somebody who enjoys the tactile feel of comics. I enjoy holding comics in my hand. And God knows we get in a new collection of old books.
Sure.
And you look through it. The smell of them is just...
There's nothing like it.
Intoxicating.
Yes.
Well, that's an amazing thing.
Well, actually leads right into my next question. You've been doing this, again, 37 years. That's my whole life, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is the craziest collection you've ever brought into Coliseum?
We recently bought the Roy Brown collection.
Sure.
Roy was a collector in Orlando, Central Florida here, and he visited all the stores, so he was a complete member of the comic community, and he was big on back issues. Roy was a completist, so he didn't care as much about the condition of the books as he did about having the book.
Sure.
So Roy was a true comic collector. He wasn't an investor. He wasn't a speculator. He was a true collector. And God love those people. I absolutely adore the true collectors because they want the story. And I would bet almost anything that Roy read 95% of his books.
Sure.
In his entire collection of, I forget how many books it was now, but it was boxes upon boxes upon boxes. We found five comics that were duplicates out of that entire collection. He had Fantastic Four #1 up, Avengers 1 up, right. X-Men 1 up. He had Brave and Bold 1 up. He had Supermans and Actions and Adventures all the way back. And my personal favorite book, Adventure 247, the first appearance of Legion of Superheroes. After all these years, I took that one copy out of the collection and it still sits on my desk. And that's my collection. So some of the other collections over the years, we bought so many great books that we just look at, and it is amazing to look at 40-year-old books when they come in beautiful condition.
Yeah.
It's like these were truly loved, but the books come in G or less condition, they were truly loved in a whole different way.
Right.
Because those people read them, they enjoyed them, their brother enjoyed them, they traded them, they did everything with them. And inevitably, the books, come back here, and we sold them to people who want to read them. And that is just, to me, that is the ultimate goal of a collection, is to put it in the hands of the people who will enjoy it most.
And I can't say I disagree with that in any way, shape, or form. There's several facets to the hobby of collecting comics, as we both know. Some people only chase the high grade stuff, the 9.4 or higher, 9.2 or higher. For me, and I think for a lot of the people on the staff as well, those well-loved books, like the books that are in that 3 to 4 range, even 2s in some circumstances. I'll give you a great example in Kissimmee right now. We have a first appearance of the Avengers. It's maybe a 1, but that book's a 1 because somebody loved that book. Somebody read that. Those characters resonated with them and carried it everywhere. I mean, we see comics frequently with like people's initials and things like that, because again, these were their prized possessions at one point, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that, for me personally, when we look at collections, that's probably the thing I like the most, right? Like these comics were well loved. Roy Brown was a great example of that. Like you said, absolutely. He probably read 95%, but, I actually had the opportunity to be there for the unveiling of that. It was a huge event for Coliseum. By your estimation, though, that is the best collection we've brought in.
It's certainly the most complete collection we've ever brought in.
Sure.
And I say that knowing that to find a more complete collection, you'd have to luck into some amazing unknown collection, because Roy spent decades building this. Decades. That's not something that just happened because somebody decided, I think I'm going to collect comic books. They had to have a true passion and a true love for it.
Right.
And that had to start a long time ago. Not that you can't start today, but it's certainly, in his case, he started a long time ago.
Sure. Absolutely. So you mentioned one of the first big key books that we actually ordered for the stands for Coliseum was Thor 337. If you don't know what that is, that's the first appearance of Beta Ray Bill, right? Yeah. He is rumored to be in the next Guardian of the Galaxy movie.
Yes.
With the comic book movies, I think we've kind of seen bounce back with customers kind of trying to explore the sources. Mm-hmm. What has been your favorite comic book movie of the past decade?
I still think the first Iron Man movie holds up incredibly well. Robert Downey Jr. brought the character fully to life. And I think that's still my favorite out of the entire series. But I also loved watching, and I was never a huge Iron Man fan, but coming out of Avengers Endgame, what a complete, amazing story that they brought to full fruition. I mean, this was a beginning to an end, just the beauty of the character and how it was the beginning of an era and it's the end of an era. Right. Based on one character. So
no, I think that, I agreed. They did a great job with like closing that chapter, and kind of, I'm really excited to see what they do next though. So
I think there's a lot of potentials for some good things, but it will be more of a challenge without someone like Robert Downey Jr., and no Captain America, that type thing, right. Or at least a different Captain America.
Right. So we've kind of talked about the challenges in the industry. We've talked about digital versus, direct market like we do. Mm-hmm. Who, in your estimation, are the best retail partners that comics retailers have in terms of publishers or distributors, things like that? Who are guys that you think stand out in the industry that you actually are excited to work with versus having to work with?
There's 2 publishers who stand out amongst all of them, who are constantly vying to see who can be better. And the fact is, they're both amazing. Image Comics is wonderful to work with. We've got a very good working relationship with them, and they have very retailer-friendly policies, which includes if if we can't sell a first issue, we can return it to them, and they'll give us credit towards the next thing.
Sure.
And it's the exact same thing with Boom. And some of these we don't even have to return them. We can rip the covers off and give them out. We can give them to libraries, things like this. Boom and Image are definitely the two best trading partners we have right now. Love them both. And for anybody who's been watching our forums along the way, we have the Boom crew coming in, which is Ross Ritchie, Philip Sablik, and Morgan Perry, who are going to be coming in and doing a forum. I believe it's next Thursday.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, we have the entire Boom Studios crew coming in. It seems like.
Yep.
Yeah, so that. I'm actually very, very much looking forward to that. Boom does some really, really great stuff with licensed properties and things like that, and I agree with you. I think they set kind of the platinum standard for what a retail partner should be in terms of comics. So
they certainly do.
So yeah, if you guys don't have it on your schedule, next Thursday we are doing our Coliseum forum with the Boom crew, and I'm looking forward to it. I think you are as well, obviously.
Oh yeah, I like these people. They're good people too.
So 37 years down.
Yeah.
I'm bad at math, but that puts us at 3 years until the 40th anniversary of Coliseum.
We're about 2.5 years now, so
where
little more than 2.5 years away.
Where do you want to see us in 40 years?
At 40 years, on yachts. I don't think that's going to happen now. The comic industry is not known for making people wealthy beyond their wildest dreams. Where would I like to see us? I would like to see us, obviously, with a few more stores, possibly.
Sure.
I would like to see us looking back at 2020 and saying, that was an interesting time, but it wasn't the death knell of anything.
Sure.
And I want to see us as a company doing more events, doing more cool things. We brought on a gentleman from Moshi Productions who's now working with us to do events.
Yep.
That's his entire job, is events and marketing coordination. And as soon as we can have crowds back in, we want to do a lot of exciting events. It's going to involve a little bit more interaction with our communities and bringing people in for events that are fun, that are interactive, that are going to be really great stuff. And we want to do more of that. We want to do more of that in more stores. And we want to do more of that, offering some different product mixes and everything else.
So I'm also going to take advantage of this opportunity that I have with you right now. Obviously, you're our president. You're our leader. You are the head of Coliseum of Comics, right?
Uh-oh. Here it comes.
You have a pretty strong team behind you that makes that happen, right? You just mentioned Moshi, who's our events manager. Yep. Who else makes Coliseum function? Like, who could you not do it without?
Well, there's no doubt that Paul has been with me for 20 plus years now, coming up on 25 years, I believe. Jeez. That Paul has been responsible for so much of the look of Coliseum.
Right.
He's designed the Coliseum logos. He's designed a lot of the layouts for the stores. He's really given the feel and the look a professional thing, because prior to Paul, and I always get ribbed about this, is all my signs were in Times New Roman and cut and paste. But Paul brought a real nice, clean look to a lot of what we do in Coliseum. And that resonates through almost everything we do to these days. Paul's also behind the scenes doing a lot of tech. I do appreciate, you've only been with me for 2 years, but I do appreciate the fact that you're in the stores, you're trying to make them better. I did say trying, keep going, we'll get there. And then, but we've had a lot of other folks along the way that have included, like Ed Uvani, who worked in the Lakeland store for a long time. He's now living with the Moose in Minnesota, but he's still working with us. Jim has been in and out of the stores for 10 years, and he's been there. And there's a lot of other folks who've been with us. Warren has been with us now for a while. He's the manager of Millennia.
Sure.
And we have a lot of newer folks, from Joan, who's now managing our Kissimmee store. We have Austin and Tampa. We have Ryan, who's new to managing Jacksonville. Dave, if you have not met Dave, he is an old-time comic book aficionado,
He
and
is.
he will talk comics when you are done talking comics. I love that about him. We've got Daniel out in Claremont. We've got Chris, who is he's a regional manager of two of our affiliate stores, and we have Aaron Holland, and then there's another dozen people on this list who have been in and out. But then you mentioned Ryan earlier. Ryan was not born when these stores were open, like most of my people.
Right.
But as of the first of this month, Ryan has been with Coliseum for 10 years. He's taken on an awful lot of things, adding new product lines. He begged me to send him to Toy Fair 3 or 4 years ago. I said, fine, but you better make it worth it. He went to Toy Fair in New York in January. That sounds more like a punishment to me than anything else. But he went there, found all these cool new things to add, which we added these bunches of product lines. Ryan has been instrumental in putting in a new POS system for us, which we used a good part of the coronavirus shutdown to work on that behind the scenes.
Right.
So despite the fact that the stores haven't been open, you, me, Ryan, Paul, Moshe, Joe in the warehouse. I can't forget Joe. He is our resident warehouse guy. I don't think he goes home.
No.
I think he lives at the warehouse. So.
I think he dematerializes if he ever leaves the warehouse.
Yes. And Ryan said if we ever stop believing in Joe, he'll disappear. But Ryan has been with Coliseum now for 10 years, and I do count on him for an awful lot of the things we do. So.
The one person I did want to point out as well, Gabby, she's our newest manager in Lakeland.
I passed over Gabby, and now I feel bad.
No, she's going to do great there, though.
I hit Lakeland, okay, because I mentioned Ed and I mentioned Joan, who was just the manager there, and I passed completely. Sorry, Gabby. Yes, I'm very happy that you're there because that looks like it's a great fit right now.
Agreed. Phil, I know you're a very busy man. You're one of the leaders in our industry. Hopefully that continues another 2.5 years until we hit 40 years, and then 10 years after that, and 10 years after that. With that said, I'll be honest, every day I get to come to work and wear a Coliseum shirt and sell comics, it is literally a dream come true. I can't thank you enough for that experience and that opportunity. And I think for our fans watching now and the thousands of people that come through our stores every year, I think they're appreciative of it as well.
Well, I'm appreciative from them coming through the doors because inevitably, if they didn't like what we do, we couldn't do it.
Absolutely.
And this has been, I would be in business somewhere if I weren't running Coliseum.
Right.
But it would not be nearly as exciting, as cool as I still get excited when Jack, I didn't even mention Jack.
How did we forget Jack?
I've got Jack, I've got Christian, who have been with us for a very long time doing this. We've also got Steve and Victoria in the warehouse working on the back issues. So anytime you see back issues, one of those 4 people, if not at least 2 of those people, have touched those back issues, looked at them, scanned them, decided what they're cool. But anytime Jack calls me and he says, I spent a lot of money. You spend, Jack, and I'll tell me. It's like, my first thing isn't, oh my God, my first reaction is, cool, what did we get?
Yeah.
Because I love comics. I love people buying comics for us, and I just love that stuff. So if you see these guys in the stores, they all visit the stores at one time or another. Say hello, ask them about what they do at the warehouse because they work awfully hard behind the scenes. So that all those books up on the walls, all the books in the boxes get out there, get priced, and hopefully are priced correctly and in order. So good stuff there.
Well, Phil, thanks again for joining us for Coliseum Forum. Guys, next week we have the Boom Studios team coming in. We look forward to seeing you back for Coliseum Forum next week. Phil, again, thank you.
Hey, you talked me into it, so here I am. So. All right, guys. Thank you.